All right, my beloved Madridistas, welcome back to the channel. Welcome back to Madrid. Okay, we have had such a crazy season. I think we're all sort of depressed and confused, like what the hell is going on? And I think it's very natural given everything that's happened. We've had so many starts and stops and, periods where you think you're kind of on the right track and then all of a sudden everything rolls over. Then, you get rid of Xavi, Arbeloa comes in and it looks like we're improving, but then once again we roll over. So I think we've had so many ups and downs. I think it's only natural to sort of want to zoom out and say, okay, what the hell happened here? How did we get here? How did we get to this situation? Because I think we're all really frustrated. And I think that if you sort of zoom out and try to kind of figure out who's to blame for all this, I think that there's tons of blame to go around, okay? All the way from the top, starting with the management team, Florentino Perez, down to the manager, the coaching staff, and then down to the players. I think that they all did their part in sort of putting us where we are now. And in some cases, there are situations and failures that have taken place that I think where more than one party was involved, where, it was the coaching staff, a decision, but it had to be approved by management. So sometimes these things overlap, but I thought we'd have a discussion as to, how the hell we got here and some of the failures at every level. And then at the end of the video, I'm going to leave you guys on a separate note. I'm going to leave you guys with a clip, very interesting clip that came out of French TV, analyzing Mbappe's movements during the Osasuna match. And I'm going to leave you guys with, it's like a 2-minute clip, but it completely validates some of the observations that we've made on this channel regarding, and in the comments section regarding the impact that Kylian has on our play when he plays. Okay, but let's go back to sort of, playing the blame game just for the sake of exercise. And I think we have to start it at the very, very top. And look, Florentino Perez is a guy that is in charge of a massive organization. Real Madrid is the biggest sporting institution in the world. It's the biggest brand in world sports. It's a not just a football club. It has everything, multiple sports. There's a charitable foundation. There's a TV channel. There's training grounds everywhere in the academy. There's even like a master's degree program. You can go get a master's degree from Real Madrid in sort of sports management and stuff. So it's a massive institution, and I understand that Florentino's his responsibilities lie in many, many different domains. Obviously, the priority is the sporting competitiveness of Real Madrid, and that obviously is up there in terms of objectives and responsibilities. But he's also in charge of the financial well-being and the sustainability of the organization. And I think sometimes trying to wear these multiple hats, sometimes mistakes are made. So, I mean, if we start sort of just with Florentino Perez and some of the issues that we have now, in the space of 2 years, Florentino brings Arda Güler, Enrique, and Mastantuono. Now, that is a very big investment in a short space of time on very, very young players. Now, what was the thinking behind bringing these players? And whether you like these players or not is a totally different issue. But I am absolutely convinced that when these players came, it was not a matter of looking at the squad and saying we need to reinforce the right wing, or we need to reinforce this or that. I don't think that's what went behind these decisions. I think that Florentino, part of what he was trying to do was to hoard young talent, because he thinks that it's very difficult to compete in the open market with state-owned clubs like City and PSG, and that it's very important to catch players young. When you can pay up for a young player, but you won't be paying the same numbers as to when they're at their peak, when they're 27, 28 years old. And so he did this with Rodrigo and Vini. It was a very big upfront investment for 2 teenagers, but it turned out to be a great investment, because you fast forward and both Vini and Rodrigo are worth a lot more than what we paid when they came. And I think that because that bet made a lot of sense and I think was successful, generally speaking successful, not only from a sporting standpoint, but from a financial standpoint, it was a good investment. I think that Florentino's thinking was, if there are exceptional young talents out there, We need to get them early, and we need to bring them here, let them develop here. And then in the future, we're going to get not only great football from very talented youngsters, but we're also going to buy an asset that will appreciate in value, and it will financially help the institution from a financial perspective. And I think that is what went into those decisions. And so you end up with players that maybe didn't fit that well tactically, in terms of overlapping positions, etc. But that was never the motivation behind the decision. Now, for example, let's talk about bringing Kylian. Now, Kylian, we had been trying to get him for years and years and years. This became a sort of obsession of Florentino Perez. But let's think objectively about, what motivated that purchase. Because yes, Kylian is an exceptional player. You could argue he's the best player in the world. I think it's an argument that you could make if you wanted. Nobody can question his technical abilities. He's phenomenal. But I mean, did we really need him? I mean, we were coming off a year of winning La Liga and the Champions League, and we had won 2 Champions Leagues in the last 3 years. The squad looked very, very competitive. Was it necessary to bring somebody in like Kylian, who had been typically playing on the left, where Vini had done a tremendous job, especially the year prior to Kylian coming? Vini had a phenomenal year. And you're going to bring a player in who's going to have to play in a position that maybe isn't 100% natural to him. But we brought Kylian. But I think that the motivation was the desire to have the best of the best, which is something that every club would want, right? You want to have the biggest names. So that was partly it. And then I think it was a commercial decision, because Kylian Mbappe is a brand in and of himself. I mean, if you look at his social media footprint, and the commercial potential of Kylian Mbappe as a brand is enormous. And Florentino does all these calculations before he brings anybody. So I think the decision to bring Kylian had to do with visibility, commercial visibility. It had to do with branding. It had to do with media attention, and it had to do with potentially lucrative investments in terms of sponsorships, etc. But I'm not entirely sure that it was 100% a football decision. But then again, you end up with the same problem, that you end up with a player that is going to now have to try to play out of position or adapt to a new position, because he didn't come thinking about which holes need to be plugged. He came thinking about commercial decisions. So there are plenty of decisions at the management level that have created, that sort of were the birth of these kind of duplication problems and structural problems that we have in the squad. So there is plenty of blame there, okay? And nobody is deflecting from that fact. But let's move down to like the coaches, for example. And I remember when Xavi was there after the Celta match, I had enough, and I came clean. I said, you guys, I'm Xavi out at this point. It happened after the Celta match. Look, you can't blame everything on Xavi, and I never blamed everything on Xavi. I thought Xavi was part of the problem. I didn't think he was the totality of the problem, but I did think that Xavi needed to go, because he had been with us for 7 months, and there was in fact, the trend seemed to be deteriorating. It wasn't that we were seeing any kind of improvement. We seemed to be going from good to worse, to worse, to worse, week after week, and I think that that's something that's unsustainable. It was also quite clear to me that Xavi did not have control of the dressing room. So that there are some issues that really do come down to the coaching team. For example, a lot of the criticisms during the Xavi era that I would make had to do with excessive rotation in the squad. And if you remember in the previews I would try to do in my videos, it was so hard to guess a starting lineup with Xavi, because it was different every single time. It wasn't just switching from 4-4-2 to like 4-3-3. No, it was changing the position of the same player multiple times. So players sometimes playing 3 different positions. I mean, Jude played a 10, then he played an 8, then he played on the left, and there was so much rotation in terms of the style, the formation, the players, etc., that I think it was impossible to develop any consistency. So that is something that I would put down to the coach and to the coaching staff. Another issue, and by the way, and I just mentioned not having control over the dressing room in some regards, that is also something that you could blame the coaches for. Now, you could also say that the management team also had something to do with Xavi not being able to control things. And this is true, because when Vini had his little spat when he was substituted and he got all upset and waved his arms, Xavi wasn't really able to punish Vini appropriately, because I think that the management of the club sided with Vini. And I think that sort of took away a lot of Xavi's power, and it reduced his ability to control the staff. So that's an example of a mistake that was made that involved two different components: the management team on the one hand for not backing Xavi, and Xavi not being able to on his own manage the chemistry of the squad. But let's look at other potential mistakes that the coaching staff made. Okay, I can tell you that the decision, for example, to let Luka Modric leave because he could have stayed another year. Luka wanted to stay another year, but Modric ended up leaving. Now, that is not a decision that would come exclusively from management. That would be a decision that would happen jointly between the coaching staff and management. And, so this is something that we could blame on Xavi when he came in, because he must have been part of that decision, whether or not to renew Luka Modric for a year. And let me tell you another decision that he was a part of, and that Xabi Alonso has a lot to do with, is Enrique leaving to France. Because that decision for Enrique to go on loan to Olympique Lyonnais, that decision is not something that was made by the club. Enrique was not getting any minutes at all, and that was down to Xabi Alonso. And then the decision for him to leave would have been something that had to be initiated or at least approved by the coaching staff in addition to the management team. So there are errors that took place at the coaching staff as well, and there are plenty of other ones. I mean, you could say Arbeloa, for example, playing Ceballos at all, giving Ceballos any minutes. That's something that you could certainly blame Arbeloa for, or bringing Gonzalo in too late in a match where you clearly needed a number 9. That's down to Arbeloa, or not substituting Kylian enough. That's down to the coaching staff as well. Or, for example, letting Kylian play in Talavera. I mean, that was clearly something that he did for his personal individual accolades, but it wasn't a very smart decision. Well, there is no way that would have happened without the coaching staff approving it. So there is plenty of playing Arda on the right sometimes when he should spend all the time as an interior player. Like, there are plenty of mistakes that have been made at the coaching level as well. So we can't exonerate the coaching staff as well. And then if you go down all the way to players, well, they're at fault as well. Because how do you explain, for example, things like lack of intensity? I mean, that is at some point the players have to be responsible too. Not making runs off the ball, not playing with the right level of intensity, or playing possession but always playing the safe pass instead of trying to create creative offensive football. I mean, these are things that come down to the players too. They can't be exonerated either. For example, Vini's conduct, right? Like protesting when you get substituted and creating unnecessary tension. Well, that's Vini. That is on Vini. So that there's sort of plenty of blame at the player level as well, because they're the ones on the pitch and they're the ones that decide whether or not they want to run or make a run off the ball or help out defensively, or their conduct and things like that. So the players are absolutely to blame as well. And like I say, in many of these cases, things overlap, right? Because the Talavera, it was Kylian's stupid idea to play in Talavera. He shouldn't have made that decision, but the coaching staff shouldn't have approved it. So anyway, there's many layers to kind of where we are, and I think there's plenty of blame to go around. So, and sometimes in the comment section, you guys have said to me, oh, you were blaming Xavi, and are you happy now? And no. I wanted Xavi out. Yes, absolutely. And I thought he was part of the problem, but I never said he was the totality of the problem, or that getting rid of Xavi would magically change everything. I actually thought that we would get a positive bounce in terms of the reaction of the team once Xavi left, and we did see that. But of course, whether that bounce is sustainable or not really depends on fundamental things like, do you have the right players, the right pieces of the puzzle in the right place? Is the management team making the right decisions with the squad that they have, etc. Those issues will determine whether you are sustainably recovering in the long term or not. But I did expect a little bit of a psychological bounce when Xavi left. Unfortunately, it didn't last. But in terms of blame, there's plenty to go around. So I don't think it's as easy as some people write in the comment section. Well, it's the players, or it doesn't matter. Now, actually, I think it's everything. It's the players, it's the coaching staff, and the decisions made in the front office as well. Okay, those are my thoughts in terms of how the hell we got to where we are, and again, plenty of blame to go around. Now, I want to leave you guys with one thing, and I think this is really interesting, and it was sent to me by one of my subs, who I had the pleasure of meeting a few weeks ago when he was in Madrid, a really nice guy, and he sent me a text, and he sent me, it's like a 2-minute clip from French television analyzing Kylian's movements and his presence during the Osasuna match. And it literally validates everything that all of the observations that we've been making on this channel in terms of how Kylian affects our play. And I've said many times that sometimes he slows our play down because he comes out of the box to get the ball and starts dribbling, and that somehow slows our play down because it means he's not up in the box where he needs to be. So then we end up creating a chance, but there's nobody in the middle. So those type of things, or for example, the fact that Kylian will only track back to touch the ball, but he won't track back to defend, and that has a knock-on effect on the rest of the squad. Like a lot of the things or him stepping outside of the box and then duplicating positions, overlapping with players typically on the left, but sometimes on the right as well. So a lot of the things that we've been observing in terms of how Kylian, nobody doubts his quality. We all know he's amazing, but in terms of the effect it has on the collective play, I want you guys to watch this video because it's in French. By the way, I did it without sound. You don't need the sound, because if you just look at the arrows and the indications, you can see exactly what the commentators are trying to say about Kylian's positioning on the pitch. So watch this and enjoy it. And just one final thing, just to remind you that tomorrow I'll be at the Bernabeu, obviously, with my uncle for the Benfica match, and I'll put up a few shorts with like the moment the bus arrives and some of the atmosphere, which I think you guys enjoy. But I'm going to leave you with this clip from French television, and just look at the arrows and some of the indications, and it absolutely validates all of the concerns that we've had regarding Kylian's impact on our collective play. All right, that's it for me, guys. Thanks for joining me as always. Let me know your thoughts in the comment section. Love you guys, and as always, Real Madrid.